Chapter 111, Leaving with the Queen, 3K, Lord's Cemetery. The transaction between the Golden Church and the Blood Apostles is still ongoing. At this time, Sylvia was looking at the Blood Apostle opposite with an extremely dangerous look. This damn heretic actually molested her daughter in front of her mother. Seeing his daughter struggling, Sylvia wanted to rush up and cut the Blood Apostle into pieces. "Can you put the saint down?" She gritted her teeth, the anger in her tone difficult to conceal. The Blood Apostle heard this but did not take any action. He could sense the current condition of his main body and he needed to delay time as much as possible. There was silence for a while, and when Sylvia seemed a little impatient, the Blood Apostle finally spoke. "Don't be anxious, beautiful High Priestess. Before making a deal, we must confirm it first. So, can you lift the Queen's veil and let me see?" he said, his eyes fixed on the Queen who had not moved. Sylvia's heart sank when she heard this. Their original plan was to lead the Blood Apostle to the cemetery where a magic circle had been set up, and then join forces with Elvin to capture the Blood Apostle and rescue Ophelia. But the Blood Apostle was too cautious. Sylvia came to the Queen with an expressionless face, then carefully took off the Queen's veil, revealing the Queen's appearance. It was indeed the Queen's appearance, exactly as Lear had known her, but the hint of nervousness in her expression still made Lear feel something was wrong. There is also a huge difference in temperament, and the real Queen had long been transferred to the palace. The Blood Apostle chuckled. He didn't expect that Sylvia could produce an almost identical counterfeit. "Is it okay?" Sylvia looked at the Blood Apostle, calm on the surface but a little nervous inside. "Ha, Miss Sylvia, if you are not sincere, this deal can be cancelled." The Blood Apostle smiled. "What do you mean?" The Blood Apostle's words made Sylvia's heart tighten. "Do you think you can deceive me with a counterfeit that is blessed with an illusion spell?" The Blood Apostle shook his head slightly. Sylvia's expression turned ugly. The Blood Apostle actually saw through that the Queen here was a fake. Is it a test or does he really see through it? This is an illusion spell cast by the extraordinary wizard Elvin. It shouldn't be seen through so easily, especially at such a long distance. "What are you talking about? What illusion spell? Do you want to break the contract?" Sylvia pretended to be stupid and said in a very tough attitude, as if the Blood Apostle was talking nonsense and wanted to break the agreement. "You know it in your heart whether it is true or not. I don't want to waste words with you." The Blood Apostle shook his head again. Under Sylvia's angry gaze, he moved the hanging saint in front of himself and sniffed the fragrance on her body with pretended fascination. "To be honest, I'm actually quite reluctant to return the saint to you. She tastes very good. Both her body and her blood are delicious," he said like a connoisseur appreciating delicious food. The Blood Apostle's tone was calm, and the onlookers looked at each other in bewilderment. The Golden Church actually used fakes to deceive the Blood Apostles? Is this still the sacred and solemn Golden Church in our impression? And what did the Blood Apostle say? "The saint tastes good." Sylvia was completely stunned, and after a brief silence, his body began to tremble. "What did you do to Ophelia?" She stared at the Blood Apostle in front of her, like a volcano that could erupt at any time. The Blood Apostle looked at Sylvia fearlessly. "I've already said that your daughter tastes very good. I like her very much. You deserve to die." Sylvia could no longer bear it, and the scepter in his hand shone with a sacred light. In front of the palace hall, the Blood Apostle and King Rosser were fighting fiercely. There is still some pressure on the high level to the extraordinary, but compared with the judge of the Golden Law, Lear's Blood Apostle is obviously more weird. A light red ripple swept across the entire venue, and immediately almost all the golden cultists and royal knights fell to the ground with red faces. Having reached a high level, Lear's blood resonance has become more domineering. He can manipulate the target's blood to stop it from flowing, and finally make the target fall to the ground and become unconscious. These operations are already very simple. Only Bishop Gass, a high-ranking prayer master, managed to hold on. Lear looked at Bishop Gass, who was still standing. The auxiliary ability of a high-level prayer was very strong. He couldn't keep Gass to assist Rosser. Immediately, he raised the blood-red rose, and the heavy sword in his hand turned into a blood-red spear, shooting towards Bishop Gass. Bishop Gass, who was already dizzy due to the resonance of blood, was furious when he saw this. He was about to defend himself, but the bloody rose had already pierced his eyes. The blood-red rose pierced Bishop Gass's shoulder, and directly pierced him and his spear into a big tree in the distance. The powerful impact caused Bishop Gass to faint. Then the bloody rose turned into a stream of light and returned to Lière's eyes. At this time, King Rosser's attack also arrived, with the long sword in his hand carrying a sacred glow, the divine pursuit of the extraordinary judge. Lière was not in a hurry. The next second his figure turned into a ball of blood mist and disappeared. When he appeared again, he had come to a golden cultist who was bleeding from all 7 orifices. High-level blood apostle skill, echo of blood. In addition to the previous blood bloom, this is another skill obtained after advancing to a high-level blood apostle. The blood apostle can travel through space through blood. He can move anywhere there is blood. It's similar to the mage's flash, but requires blood as a medium. Damned heretic. Is all you can do about it is hide? Rosser roared. The blood apostle in front of him was too agile, not as strong as him, and his magic level was not as good, but he could not do anything to him. Damned heretic? Her Majesty the Queen is also a heretic. Does she deserve to die too? Lière responded coldly. Philia is different from heretics like you. Rosser took a deep breath. I don't know who you are, nor do I know your relationship with Philia, but Philia is my wife. I will not watch her being tried by the Golden Church. I will let her leave safely instead of handing Philia over to someone like you. Lière was stunned for a moment. What did Rosser mean? Was he planning to let the Queen go? For a moment he was a little confused. He thought that the king's agreement to imprison the Queen in the palace was a sign of his complete loyalty to the Golden Sea and a signal of his complete abandonment of the Queen. But now it seems different from what he imagined. Not far away, Milia watched Lière and his father fighting, feeling a little overwhelmed. On one side was her fiancé, and on the other was her father. Who should she help? Why did they fight? Anyway, just when Milia was struggling, a figure suddenly appeared behind Milia. She patted Milia on the shoulder and said, Milia, why are you here? Milia was startled and quickly raised the Morningstar scepter and turned around. Just as she was about to say something, she saw her mother looking at her with a smile on her face. Mother? Milia showed a happy expression. Queen Philia stood in front of Miria and looked at her daughter. Why are you here? Didn't I ask Lière to hide you? I asked Lière to bring me here. Milia was a little embarrassed, and then raised the Morningstar scepter in her hand. Mother, I can use the Morningstar scepter now. I can also help Lière. Oh, is that so? Philia was a little surprised. She stroked Miria's head and said, It seems that your Morningstar law is about to awaken. As she spoke, she turned her head and looked at the blood apostle and Rosser who were fighting not far away. Philia shook her head helplessly. Milia, let me use the Morningstar scepter. Milia did not hesitate and handed the Morningstar scepter in her hand to Philia. After taking the Morningstar scepter, Philia directly activated the power of the Morningstar scepter, and a magic circle emitting mysterious light instantly appeared under the feet of Lière and Rosser. Lière and Rosser, who were still fighting fiercely, suddenly felt that they had lost their strength. They both staggered and almost fell. Enough. How long do you want to fight? Philia cursed with a smile. Lière and Rosser were both stunned when they heard this. They looked to the side and saw Philia looking at them. The Queen was released. Lière was a little surprised, and Rosser's expression was a little gloomy. When he came to see the blood apostle, he opened the prison where the Queen was imprisoned and let Philia escape quickly. Letting Philia go freely will allow the blood apostle to take the blame, so that Philia will not fall into the hands of the blood apostle, nor will he be judged by the Golden Church. Philia, didn't I let you escape? Rosser said in a deep voice with some dissatisfaction, so I'm out, right? The Queen smiled. You should understand what I mean. I want you to avoid the blood apostles and leave. Rosser was still somewhat dissatisfied. Are you jealous, dear? Philia walked to Rosser and kissed her gently on the face. Rosser's face turned red, but he didn't say anything. Philia smiled and stopped teasing her husband. Instead, she said to Lière, Thank you very much for coming to save me. No need. Lière shrugged and was about to say something when he was interrupted by Rosser. Philia, do you know the blood apostle? Rosser asked with some disbelief, looking at the blood apostle with hostility in his eyes. Ever since he learned that the blood apostle was going to exchange Philia for the saint and the Golden Church, he felt very uncomfortable. He could not disobey the Golden Church, but a heretic was coming to save his wife. This made him feel like he was being replaced. Moreover, he had no idea who the blood apostle was or what his relationship with Philia was. This is the jealousy that any man would have, that his beautiful wife knows an equally powerful man, but as a husband he doesn't know it. Any man will have a sense of crisis. End of this chapter. Chapter 112. Ending and leaving. 3K, Rosser, well, the blood apostle is the descendant of one of my friends. Don't think too much about it. Philia shook her head helplessly. She had been with the Rossers for so many years, how could she not know what the other party was thinking? Youngster? Rosser was stunned for a moment, looking at the blood apostle in front of him suspiciously. Since he was the younger generation of a friend of Philia, he must know him, but he couldn't tell who he was. The other person's face was hideous, like a real devil. Rosser was a little confused. Your Majesty, are you going to let the Queen go? Lear suddenly asked Rosser. What's the problem? Rosser snorted coldly. Do you think I will really watch Philia being killed by the Golden Church? Lear remained silent upon hearing this. Why would he come here if he had been told this? Seeing that the blood apostle stopped talking, Rosser didn't want to talk to him anymore, so he turned to Philia and asked, Philia, I can't betray the Golden Law, so I can only ask you to leave the royal city temporarily. It's okay. I understand your difficulties. Ever since I was discovered by the Golden Church, I have been prepared and have thought about what to do next. Queen Philia smiled gently. Have you planned what to do next? Rosser asked in surprise, glancing at the blood apostle while speaking. As long as Philia doesn't leave with the blood apostle, he can accept anywhere she goes. Yes. Queen Philia nodded. I plan to follow Albert to the Pharaoh fortress. That is Stuart's territory and the scope of the War Church. Without the Golden Church, I will not be in danger. Hearing Philia's words, Rosser thought for a few seconds and nodded. It's indeed a good choice. It's a good opportunity to take Milia with us. She doesn't have to hide in Stuart House anymore. Once we go to Fort Pharaoh, we won't have to worry about being discovered by the Golden Church. Philia added, glancing at Milia beside Lear. Emilia was wearing a light blue mask at this time, and her body was wrapped in a black robe, with her hair covered. Rosser had not recognized her yet. Lear was holding Milia's hand and did not let Milia and Rosser recognize each other. Philia could understand that Lear did not want Rosser, a believer in the Golden Rule, to know his identity. If Rosser knew that Stuart's successor was the Apostle of Blood, it would increase the risk of exposing Lear's identity as the Apostle of Blood. It will have an impact on the Stuart family. In that case, I will explain to Albert and ask him to take Lear and Milia to Fortress Pharaoh. Rosser finally sighed helplessly. If Philia and Milia both left, he would be the only one left in the palace. He does have a son, who is Milia's brother, but he is currently studying at the Imperial Law Academy of the Rhodes Empire and will not be able to return until he finishes his studies. Rosser felt a little resentful. Why was the Golden Rule's doctrine to eliminate all heresy? Although Philia had never done anything evil, this was the first time he questioned the Golden Rule. On the other side, in the Lord's cemetery, the incarnation of blood was suffering from Sylvia's crazy attack. It turns out that you should never mess with a madwoman. After being provoked, Lear felt that it would be difficult for him to cope with Sylvia alone. After confession, his overall attributes dropped a lot. If it weren't for the echo of blood and Aslan's royal swordsmanship, he would have been caught. In addition, there were two extraordinary professionals, Ur and Irwin, next to him. Ur can be ignored, but Irwin is troublesome. The mage's frost spell restrictions and arcane spell attacks would have made Lear's situation even more difficult if there hadn't been so many people watching around, limiting Elvin's ability to use large-scale spells while dodging. The blood apostle sensed that the main body had finished the job, so he threw Li Huan out. Before throwing him out, Lier also pulled out the Holy Spirit scepter that was tied to Li Huan. Li Huan's mouth was stuffed with cloth and she couldn't speak. She could only make terrified whimpering sounds. When Sylvia saw her daughter being thrown back, she was shocked and quickly hugged her daughter. At this time, the life-binding shackles tied to Li Huan also disappeared. Sylvia lifted the veil, only to see a strange face. Li Huan looked at the woman in front of him with an embarrassed look on his face. She was very beautiful, but also very annoying. She acted decisively, took out her sword, and stabbed it into her chest, demonstrating on the spot what a clean suicide is. Sylvia stared blankly at the strange girl who committed suicide, when a voice came to her ears. "You don't really think I would be so stupid as to bring the saint here, do you? I will take good care of Ophelia for you." The blood apostle whispered softly in Sylvia's ear. Sylvia raised her head suddenly, and the anger in her heart could no longer be suppressed. Just when she was thinking of catching the blood apostle at all costs, the blood apostle in the air turned into a blood mist and disappeared. "Blood apostle!" Sylvia roared. After being teased again and again, She was on the verge of exploding. Alvin fell from the sky and looked at the place where the blood apostle disappeared. He could feel that the blood apostle had not yet reached the extraordinary level, but he was able to hold on for so long in the hands of the three extraordinary professionals and finally escaped really great. He shook his head. He had done his best anyway, and the final result was not something he could control. War also came over, and the high priest also looked a little ugly. He recognized the person who had just committed suicide. It was the one who had committed suicide at the door of the Golden Cathedral before, not the saint. It turned out that the blood apostle did not bring the saint with him from the beginning, but brought an impostor just like them. Now his perfect plan has completely failed. Not only did he fail to rescue the saint, but he also failed to capture the blood apostle, but fortunately, they moved the queen and she is still there. Ur took a deep breath. Don't you find it strange? Erwin on the side suddenly spoke. What? Ur looked at Erwin. Don't you think it's a little strange that the blood apostle brought an impostor with him to deal with us? Erwin continued. He knew that the person he brought was a fake, and that we didn't bring the queen, but he didn't run away right away. Instead, he delayed with us for so long. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's expression changed. At this moment, a golden cultist with blood on his face ran over from a distance. Seeing Sylvia and Ur, he said in panic, the queen was taken away by the blood apostle. What did you say? Ur's expression changed completely, and he looked a little bit unbelievable. The blood apostle was clearly fighting with them just now, but he rescued the queen in the blink of an eye? Even teleportation can't be so exaggerated, right? And how did the blood apostle know where the queen was hidden? 2 days later, at Stewart Mansion, Lear sat in a chair, opposite Queen Philia and Princess Miria, and next to him was Albert. 2 days had passed since the transaction between the Golden Church and the blood apostles, and the news had almost spread. The queen was rescued, but the Golden Church failed to get the saint back. It is rumored that the blood apostle has the ability to create clones, and he used his clones to trick the Golden Church. Then he went to the palace to injure King Rosser and finally took the queen away. The Golden Church planned to use robbery to rescue the saint and capture the blood apostle at the same time, but in the end it became a complete laughingstock. Albert had a strange feeling when he looked at Queen Philia and Milia, who were getting along so well with each other. Lear said he could bring the queen back, and he really brought the queen back. Albert also went to the scene to watch the transaction between the blood apostles and the Golden Church, but he didn't expect that both parties had ulterior motives. Lear, do you know the blood apostle? Albert suddenly asked Lear. You know me, right? Lear smiled. The other party just sent the queen to you directly? Albert still felt a little unbelievable. Yeah, about the same. Lear nodded. Albert looked at Lear deeply. His son was indeed connected to the blood apostle. It seemed that this was related to the communication of the blood law between the original Lear and him before he awakened. He shook his head. He was not very opposed to this. He had a good impression of the blood apostles. At least they did not seem like the evil heretic law believers. Philia, do you really want to go to Fort Pharaoh with us? Albert asked. Of course, Rose should have told you. Don't you welcome me? Queen Philia blinked. Albert smiled when he heard this, and felt like he was back to the time when Rosser had not yet become king and the three of them were on an adventure. Of course not. I'm glad Rosser made this decision. Then let's set off in 3 days. It will be safer if we leave earlier. Albert said after thinking for a while. Now the Golden Church is searching the whole city for the blood apostles like crazy. We must take the queen and Milia away as soon as possible to avoid any more trouble. Father, please take Her Majesty the Queen away first. Lear suddenly said. Albert looked at Lear and frowned. Aren't you going with me? I still have some things to deal with. Lear smiled. Lafanina is also imprisoned in the basement. If we want to take the saint away, we cannot take her with Albert. I'm with Lear too. Milia walked to Lear and hugged his arm. She also guessed why Lear was leaving late. The queen and Albert looked at the two men in a strange manner. Albert pondered for a moment, then said, Well, I don't know what you have to do, but I hope you can know the limits. Don't worry, father. I know what I'm doing. Lear nodded. End of this chapter. Chapter 113. The saint who gradually became a useless person. 4K. 3 days later. In front of Stewart Mansion, a carriage was ready to go. King Rosser, who had disguised his identity, looked at Queen Philia in the carriage with a somewhat lonely expression. Aren't you going with Albert? Rosser glanced at Lear, who was silent beside him. After a while, Lear smiled and didn't explain anything. The maids in the house packed their luggage and got on the carriage one by one. These maids had all awakened their affinity with the blood law, so Lear dismissed them out of concern. Fortunately, he let Albert take them to the Pharaoh fortress. Moreover, these maids knew everything about him, so he wouldn't need to look for other servants when he arrived at Fort Pharaoh. Silly brother. You really don't want to come with us? Avian in the carriage looked at Lear reluctantly. Sister, you guys go first, I'll catch up soon. Lear nodded at Avian. I'll be waiting for you at Fort Pharaoh. Don't make me wait too long. You are my son after all, and Fort Pharaoh will be handed over to you in the future. Albert also glanced at Lear. Lear nodded, and then the carriage slowly drove away from Stewart Mansion, leaving only Lear and Rosser. When you and Milia plan to leave, please notify me. Rosser reminded Lear and left. The entire Stewart house was deserted, leaving only Lear and Miriam, Eno and Adele, and Ophanina in the basement. Master, when are we leaving? After returning to the mansion, Eno walked up to Lear and Milia also came out of the bedroom and looked at Lear with hope. As long as she left the royal city and went to the Pharaoh fortress, she could go out openly and no one would know her. There would be no golden church either. Wait a week. Lear thought for a moment. It would take about half a month to get to Fort Pharaoh by carriage. If they set off in a week, the queen should have been settled by the time they arrived at the fort. Lear had to find a place to settle Ophanina down first, and it depended on Albert's arrangements for him. It would be best to have a separate mansion so that he could continue to keep Ophanina under house arrest. Moreover, he had not been back to Fort Pharaoh for more than 10 years, so he did not know much about the situation in the fort. Lear shook his head. He had a feeling that this trip to Fort Pharaoh would not be peaceful. Time passed slowly and the royal city gradually calmed down, but only the lives of the citizens of Wancheng have calmed down, while the lives of the Golden Church have not calmed down. Sylvia intensified his search for the whereabouts of the Blood Apostle in the royal city. Lear stayed indoors, and the upper echelons of the kingdom all knew that the Stewart family would leave the royal city and return to Fort Pharaoh. Albert has already gone ahead, and Lear will leave soon. Not on the third day, Lear met the player again. This is the last day of closed beta. In the living room, Li Huanhuan and Yao Yao handed all the props and items on them to Lear. Mr. Lear, Yao Yao and I are about to return to our original world. Could you please keep these things for us? As Li Huanhuan spoke, she and Yao Yao took out all the valuables on them. Lear took a look and saw that most of them were coins and some rags, but he also saw a rare item. The long-tailed cat pin turned out to be a relic of the law. Looking at the effect of the long-tailed cat pin, Lear's expression was a little strange. It had only been a few days since the internal test, and Li Huanhuan had already obtained a relic of law. Her luck was a little too good. I can keep it for you, but I need to remind you that I will leave the royal city in a few days and go to the Pharaoh fortress on the border. If you come back, you have to find me there to get these things back. Lear smiled. The two women were stunned for a moment and looked at each other. Li Huanhuan asked, Mr. Lear, what kind of place is Fort Pharaoh? That is the base of our Stewart family, a place that believes in the laws of war, Lear explained. Believe in the laws of war? Li Huanhuan's eyes lit up. She always liked tough battles. The laws of war sounded like something that meant being good at fighting. Yes, there is only the war church in the Pharaoh fortress. There are no other orthodox sections. Does that mean even the Golden Church is gone? No, Lear replied. Li Huanhuan nodded. She was just about to stay away from the Golden Church. After this internal test, her impression of the Golden Church had dropped to freezing point. It would be a good decision to go to the Pharaoh fortress after the public beta test, but she thought of the Blood Apostle again. Ever since she was thrown to Sylvia by the Blood Apostle last time, the Blood Apostle has disappeared, and even the blood law profession as a reward for the task was not given to her. The mission is shown as completed, and the user is prompted to find the Blood Apostle to claim the reward, but the person is gone. Li Huanhuan showed a slightly resentful expression. What's wrong? Lear noticed Li Huanhuan's mood change and asked. Nothing, I just thought of someone. Li Huanhuan forced a smile. When we come back, we will go to the Pharaoh fortress to find you. Lear nodded and watched Li Huanhuan and the other girl leave without saying anything else. After the two left, he put away the items on the table and took a look at the long-tailed cat pin. Maybe it would be useful. He thought about it and took a sip of the tea on the table. He always felt that he might have forgotten something. After thinking for a few seconds, he suddenly raised his head and finally remembered, I haven't transferred Li Huanhuan to the blood law profession yet. It was late at night and Li Huanhuan and Yao Yao stood on the roof of the clock tower, looking at the night view of the royal city below. In 3 hours, their internal test would be over. After a month, I still feel reluctant to give up. This game is too real, and those NPCs are also very annoying. Yao Yao, are you sure you want to go to the Pharaoh Fortress during the public beta? You have changed your job to a mage, and there is no arcane academy there. Li Huanhuan looked at Yao Yao and said, It's okay, I'll be wherever Mr. Lear is. And Mr. Lear is also a wizard. I can learn from him. Yao Yao answered nonchalantly. The two girls were chatting idly, and a dark shadow slowly emerged behind them. So you are here. The blood apostle walked out from the shadows. Li Huanhuan and Yao Yao turned their heads reflexively. Seeing the blood apostle, Li Huanhuan became a little excited. It seems that the blood apostle is not a liar. She almost thought that the blood apostle would run away after using her. According to the agreement, I will let you switch to the blood law profession. Are you ready? The blood apostle said in a deep voice. I'm ready. Li Huanhuan raised her hand immediately. Lier didn't say any more nonsense. A bright red light flashed in his eyes, and a strange magic circle appeared under Li Huanhuan's feet. There are 2 classes in the blood law, Blood Knight and Blood Hunter. The former is more of a warrior, while the latter is more agile. I choose Blood Knight. Li Huanhuan made the decision without thinking too much. She liked frontal and aggressive battles. Lier said nothing more after hearing this. The power of the blood law was directly integrated into Li Huanhuan's body. You changed your job to the blood law class, Blood Knight. You gain mysticism +5, constitution +5. You have obtained the Blood Knight apprentice skills, blood contract, bloodthirsty /. Li Huanhuan felt a large amount of information appearing in his mind, and the skills of the Blood Knight were engraved deep in his soul. She suddenly opened her eyes, grasped the long sword at her waist, and swung it forward. The long sword wrapped in bright red sword energy hit the wall of the bell tower directly, shattering the thick bricks. Li Huanhuan showed an excited expression. Lier looked at this scene. Since Li Huanhuan had changed his job to Blood Knight, he basically couldn't escape. It was extremely difficult for players to change their job in the game, and it required extremely precious and rare items. Well, now that you have completed your job change, it's time for me to leave. The blood apostle said in a deep voice. Mr. Munger, I am now a professional of the blood law. If I want to upgrade my rank in the future, where should I find you? Seeing that the blood apostle was about to disappear again, Li Huanhuan asked hurriedly. I'll be there when you need me. Lear answered ambiguously. He is about to go to the Pharaoh Fortress. Since the things of Li Huanhuan and others are in his hands, he will naturally come during the public beta test. He can then find them. After Lier finished speaking, he disappeared into the night without waiting for Li Huanhuan to say anything else. Watching the disappearing figure of the blood apostle, Li Huanhuan sighed helplessly. The only good thing about this blood apostle was that he was too elusive. Lier did not go home directly after leaving. In addition to Li Huanhuan, there was another person. Golden Cathedral, underground prison. Dahe felt like he had been forgotten. He had been locked up here for 5 or 6 days. Before, there were people who came to torture and interrogate him, but now, there was no one left. I heard that all the believers of the Golden Cathedral were out in force, frantically searching for the whereabouts of the blood apostle in the royal city, and even the prison guards were transferred away. He hadn't eaten for 2 days, and his character panel was warning him that he was about to die. Dahe was a little helpless, but it didn't matter now. The internal test would be over soon anyway. It was just that the reward for the blood apostle's mission had not been claimed yet, and Dahe was itching to get it. Just as he was waiting for the countdown to the internal test, a dark shadow suddenly appeared in the cell. Dahe was stunned for a moment, looked up at the figure that suddenly appeared, and looking at the ferocious face, he suddenly felt like tears welling up in his eyes. Time flies, and the week that Lear planned has passed. He came to the basement, but he had not yet told the other party that he was about to take Ophelia away. Ophelia also knew nothing about what was happening in the outside world. The door of the secret room was pushed open, and Lear saw the saint, who seemed to have gotten used to imprisonment. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Ophelia turned her head. She was used to Lear coming to suck her blood every morning. Even when Lear came in, he didn't move and continued to lie lazily on the bed. During the days of imprisonment, someone would bring her food every day, and she would go to sleep after eating. She had never experienced such a feeling before. As if being treated as a pet by others, Ophelina began to feel that there was nothing wrong with this. However, she was a little disappointed that Lear did not come to whip her again. "Hey, my dear saint, it's time for us to leave here," Lear said with some amusement as he looked at the saint who was gradually becoming a useless person. Ophelina blinked and looked at Lear, and it took her a while to react. "Leave here? Where to go?" Was this bastard going to show mercy and let her go? Seeing that Ophelia didn't move, Lear walked forward helplessly, pulled Ophelia up, and whispered in the saint's ear, "We are leaving the royal city, you have to go with me." "Leave the royal city?" Ophelia was stunned. Lear did not answer, but leaned down and bit Ophelia's neck, tasting the blood of the pure saint. He let go of her mouth only when all the magic power in Ophelina's body was sucked out by him. Ophelina's face turned a little red. When Lear sucked her blood, her body always had some special reactions, making her feel weak legs and hot and uncomfortable. Although she didn't want to admit it, Ophelina felt that she might have really become a perverted woman. "Your mother is so angry with me. Now the whole royal city knows that the saint has been possessed by the blood apostle. We must leave and go to a safer place." Lear looked at Ophelia jokingly. "Mother? What did you do to my mother?" Hearing Lear mention her mother, Ophelia finally had some reaction. "Nothing, just let your mother think that the blood apostle has possessed you." Lear smiled slightly. "How could you do this?" Ophelina said with a flushed face. Now her mother knew about her affairs. How could she face her mother in the future? "You can only stay with me for the rest of your life. What if your mother finds out?" Lear kissed the wound on Ophelia's neck. "Okay, don't say anything extra. Now you just need to follow me." Letting go of Ophelina, Lear took out a sack from his storage ring. "In order to prevent you from being discovered, I have to let you bear with it for a while." "You want to put me in a bag?" Ophelina couldn't believe it. "The city gate is being searched. Your portrait has been posted all over the royal city. For extra safety, this is the only way." Lear shrugged. He had originally planned to tie Ophelina up and put her in the carriage and leave, but Sylvia set up a search at the city gate, so he had no choice but to do this. "I'm not asking for your opinion, I'm just informing you." As he spoke, the life-binding shackles appeared out of thin air. Controlling the life-binding shackles, Lear directly tied up Ophelia's hands and feet, like a mummy. After doing all this, he took out the sleeping pills that he had used to knock out Ophelina and covered her mouth and nose with them. Just like that, Ophelina fell asleep with a look of resentment on her face. Lear puts Ophelina into a sack and carries her out of the chamber. End of this chapter. Chapter 114, Sudden Assassination, 4K. As soon as he walked out of the secret room, Lear saw Milia coming towards him. Milia had changed into a maid outfit at this time. Her beautiful silver hair had turned into short black hair, and her deep blue eyes had turned black. If you were not someone who was very familiar with Milia, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that the girl in front of you was the princess. How is it? Milia lifted her skirt and turned around on the spot. Very beautiful. Lear smiled. Milia's cheeks turned red, and she said unhappily, "I'm asking you, how is my disguise?" "It's very suitable. I think even His Majesty the King might not recognize you if he doesn't look carefully." Lear touched his chin. Milia nodded, looked down at her own, and approved of what Lear said. "Where is the saint?" Milia suddenly asked. "Here." Lear pointed to the sack on his shoulder. "You put the saint in a bag?" Milia covered her mouth, a little surprised. "Won't this be dangerous?" "It's okay. A high-level professional won't get hurt so easily." Lear shrugged. As he spoke, he walked to the carriage parked in the garden, opened the door, and in front of Milia, he placed Ophelia directly in the space under the carriage seat. Then the cushion was put back on. As if nothing had happened, Milia was stunned. Looking at Lear's skillful movements, she suddenly felt fortunate that she was Lear's fiancée, otherwise, she would probably be keeping the company of the saint now. Milia's body trembled slightly, and her expression became a little complicated. After settling Ophelina, Lear and Milia came to the living room where the king had been waiting for a long time. Next to them stood Eno and Adele. Since advancing to a higher level, Lear could feel that his control over the blood law profession had become more comprehensive now that Adele knows Lear's identity. She is almost completely loyal to him, both physically and mentally. Seeing Lear and a strange maid appear, Rosser was stunned for a moment, looked at the maid carefully, and then said strangely, "You are Milia?" "Yes, father." Milia gave Rose a hug. "How could you let Milia wear a maid's clothes?" Rosser looked at Lear with some dissatisfaction. "It has nothing to do with Lear," Milia said immediately. "I borrowed this from Eno, and I took the initiative to dress like this." Rosser looked at his daughter helplessly. It had only been a short while since she had turned her elbow outward. "Okay, Milia, you must be careful when you follow Lear to the Pharaoh fortress. Write to me if you have any problems." "I understand, father." Milia nodded. After everyone chatted for a while, Lear, Milia and Eno got on the carriage. Lear drove the car while Milia and Eno sat in the carriage. "Sylvia searches the city gates every day now. Are you sure there is no problem?" Rosser asked in a deep voice as he looked at Lear, who was about to drive away. "Don't worry, there will be no problem." Lear smiled, pulled the reins, and the horse started moving. Watching Lear and others leave, Rosser also left with some melancholy. A carriage engraved with the Stuart lion family emblem drove along, and many nobles stopped to watch. The Stuart family was planning to leave the royal city, and this news had already spread. The Duke of Norton stood on the street, watching the slowly approaching carriage, and felt relieved. Although Albert had accepted his compensation before, the Stuart family was still a huge rock weighing on his heart. Now that Stuart is gone, he can finally relax for a while. As the carriage passed in front of him, Duke Norton saw Adele sitting in the carriage. Adele also saw her father, but her eyes did not fluctuate at all. She is Lear's now, and everything about her belongs to Lear. Lear drove the carriage and arrived at the city gate in about half an hour. Sylvia also stood at the entrance of the city gate, watching the people coming and going. The former saint looked a little tired. It seemed that the matter of the blood apostle really worried her. The carriage drove up to Sylvia and stopped. "Your Excellency the High Priest." Lear greeted with a smile. Sylvia glanced at Lear, then glanced inside the carriage, where three beautiful maids were sitting side by side. She also heard that the Stuart family was planning to move out of the royal city, but she didn't say much. "Let them pass," Sylvia said to the golden cultist beside him. The blockade was lifted. Lear smiled and said to Sylvia as he was about to leave, "High Priest Sylvia, I believe that Her Highness the Saint must still be alive. May the laws of war bless you." Sylvia was stunned for a moment, and the golden church around him looked at each other. Lear chuckled, said no more, and drove the carriage out of the city gate. It wasn't until Lear walked away that Sylvia reacted, and her eyes looking at Lear became a little complicated. After walking a long way and no longer seeing the walls of the royal city, Lear stopped. He heard bursts of humming sounds coming from the carriage. Emilia and the other two girls also felt something vibrating under the cushion. "Let Affanina out." Lear nodded to Milia. Emilia stood up, and Eno and Adele also stood up and sat on the cushions on the other side. Milia opened the cushion and saw a sack squirming inside. Taking out the sack, Milia untied the rope. Affanina stuck her head out with messy hair and an angry face, but her mouth was stuffed with a towel and she couldn't speak. It was not until Milia took out the towel that she glared at Lear, who was driving. "Lear, how could you do this to me? Your Highness, please be careful with your words. You are my prisoner now. No matter what I do to you, you cannot resist." Lear continued driving and said lightly. Affanina paused, gritted her teeth, but said nothing more. After spending so much time with Lear, she almost understood him. But if you speak nicely to the other person, he will not make things difficult for you, but if you go against Lear, the outcome will definitely not be good. Ophelia snorted coldly and looked out the window. "Since we have left the royal city now, can you untie it for me?" "No, you have to stay like this until we arrive at Fort Pharaoh and settle you down." Lear ruthlessly rejected Ophelia's request. The carriage was driving on the main road. The roads in the kingdom were not as smooth as those in Lear's previous life. They were just ordinary dirt roads, but the ground was still flat. In the carriage, Ophelia looked at the scenery outside boredly. She was not restrained now. In the end, Lear untied her. After all, the journey to Fort Pharaoh is long, and as a woman, Affanina always has some needs, so Lear untied some of the life-binding shackles so that Affanina could deal with her own physical needs. Of course, it would only be untied during the day and tied again at night. Lear didn't want to have to worry about whether the saint would escape when he was resting at night. Milia glanced at Affanina, who was sitting opposite her. She had tried to talk to the saint along the way, but Affanina had always been indifferent. The sky gradually darkened. They had been traveling for a week and were halfway through the journey. In another week, they would reach Fort Pharaoh. Lear stopped the carriage and fed the horses some hay, then he took out some food from the storage ring and everyone started eating. After eating and drinking, everyone found a sheltered place to rest. Mariette and the other two girls got off the carriage and set up the tent, while Lear slept in the carriage with Ophelia. Soon everyone fell asleep in a dark corner. 3 black shadows were slowly approaching the carriage where Lear and others were. The shadow paused when he saw the lion logo on the carriage. This should be it. This is the family emblem. The leading man in black said in a deep voice, "Get ready, move quickly, and make sure to kill everyone in the carriage and tent. Mr. Roberto, he's just a mid-level wizard and 3 maids. There's no way they can survive." Another man in black said disdainfully, "Can we keep the 3 maids for a while? I saw them during the day and they were all so beautiful. Damn the nobles, such beautiful women are just maids." The remaining fat man suddenly said. He looked at the tent not far away with lustful eyes. "It's up to you, Habib. As long as you can kill Lear, you can do whatever you want with the remaining women." The man in black named Roberto nodded. "I want the maid with long black hair." "Ha, Gio, it seems you're greedy too." The bloated Habib laughed. After the 3 of them finished speaking, they carefully walked towards the carriage. Under the cover of night, their figures could not be seen, as if they had disappeared. Just when the 3 men arrived in front of the carriage and were about to open the window, the blood apostle with a hideous face was staring at them from the big tree above their heads. When the 3 men were about to take action, he jumped down from the sky. The 3 cautious people were startled and suddenly burst into speed. Retreating violently, they stared at the devil who suddenly appeared. His bright red pupils emitted a strange red light, and the horns on his forehead were also terrifying and hideous. "What is that?" Roberto, the leader, whispered. The blood apostle did not answer, but just looked at the 3 people in front of him. In the carriage, Lear, who was originally sleeping, suddenly opened his eyes. He felt the unusual movement of the blood apostle. Before going to bed, he gave the blood incarnation a simple command to keep watch. Now that the blood incarnation was moving, it meant that something unusual had occurred. When Lear woke up, the red light in the eyes of the blood apostle outside flickered and became more lively. He looked at the 3 people in front of him. Based on Lear's gaming experience in his previous life, he recognized the 3 people's professions at a glance. Spy, under the law of war, there is another class besides War Knight and Berserker, known for his powerful stealth, tracking and assassination abilities. Why would there be a spy here? And his level is not low. In the carriage, Lear looked through the window and saw 1 high level and 2 middle level ones. This is already a powerful force. In the dark night, neither side spoke and the atmosphere was a little weird. Lear got off the carriage carefully. Seeing the 3 spies, he thought in Brayfield, almost all the professionals of the law of war stayed in Stuart's territory, not to mention the high-level spies. The other parties seemed to be coming for him. Why would the spies in Stuart's territory come looking for him? It happened late at night, and it was obviously a conspiracy, or an assassination. Lear walked out from the darkness and appeared before everyone. "Are you here to kill me?" he asked directly. The 3 spies were stunned when they saw Lear, and then their eyes became gloomy. The young man in front of them was their target, and they had seen his portrait. Roberto, the leader, looked gloomy. He had planned to assassinate Lear without anyone noticing, but now he was discovered. But it doesn't matter. A mid-level mage can't cause any trouble. The only thing that made him feel a little afraid now was the devil standing not far away. "My friend, our target is Lear. This is an internal affair of the Stuart family. If you don't want to provoke Stuart, don't interfere." Roberto threatened. The blood apostle still didn't speak, but Lear raised his eyebrows. "These 3 spies are indeed from the Stuart family, but are they here to assassinate me?" Lear raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that the Stuart family was not as simple as he had imagined. He had been away for so long, and not everyone wanted him, the heir, to return. Is there anyone who wants to compete with him for the position of Stuart's heir? Lear thought to himself, but soon he shook his head. Avian goes back to the Pharaoh fortress once a year. She has never heard that Albert has other children, and she has never heard of Albert having other sons in the game plot of her previous life, who wanted to kill him. Lear fell into deep thought. "My friend, do you want to provoke the Stuart family?" Seeing that the blood apostle did not move, Roberto threatened again. This time the blood apostle raised his head, red light flashing in his eyes. Lear also raised his head and looked at the 3 spies in front of him. He waved his hand, and the blood apostle came to him. "Are you going to threaten my avatar?" He gave a funny smile. Incarnation? Roberto was stunned for a moment, then he understood. This devil in front of him who gave him a strong sense of oppression was actually the incarnation of the assassination target. You are professionals of Stuart, but you come to assassinate me, the heir of Stuart. Lee Eyre interrupted Roberto directly. I am curious, who wants me dead? He looked at Roberto with a gentle smile on his face. There was no malice in that smile, but it made Roberto's hair stand on end. Could you please tell me? Lee Eyre took out the Night Rose. End of this chapter. Chapter 115, The Assassin from Stuart, 3K, you triggered the mission assassination from the Shadow, sea level. You were assassinated by unknown spies. They came from your hometown of Stuart. These spies were instructed by someone, and there seemed to be some secrets hidden behind them. Mission objective, kill these spies. Task reward, 5 experience points, 10 gold coins. The task panel popped up in front of Lear. Lear just took a look and closed it. He was used to it. Roberto's expression turned gloomy. Things were beyond his expectations. The information clearly showed that Stuart's heir was only a mid-level wizard, but which wizard had such a terrifying incarnation? Moreover, the opponent's own magic fluctuations were obviously not at the intermediate level, and there was also that black and purple rapier. Even at such a distance he could still feel a sharp worry. Roberto took a deep breath, was silent for a few seconds, gritted his teeth and said to his companions around him, do it. Upon hearing the order, the other 2 spies rushed forward without hesitation. Lear did not move. The incarnation of blood beside him rushed forward. Bright red life-binding shackles appeared in the darkness and wrapped around the 2 of them. The 2 spies were very skillful and knowledgeable. The sudden appearance of the chain startled them, but they reacted quickly. The power of the law of war on their bodies fluctuated, and their speed suddenly increased, quickly bypassing the incarnation of blood. Lier looked at the other party's actions and realized that he was a very experienced spy. He was not like Mori, who had professional skills but very low combat effectiveness. They are professionals who have truly experienced combat. However, mid-level professionals are still mid-level after all, and are not worth mentioning at all. A faint blood color flashed in the eyes of the blood incarnation, and the blood resonance was activated. The 2 spies who passed the incarnation of blood and rushed towards Lear suddenly felt a sense of suffocation, and the blood in their bodies seemed to stop flowing. This feeling did not last long, but it was enough to stop the actions of the 2. Then the life-binding shackles wrapped around them again. This time, the 2 had no ability to resist at all and were directly wrapped up like a dumpling by the life-binding shackles. When the 2 recovered from the feeling of suffocation and wanted to struggle, they found that their strength was rapidly fading. Not far away, Roberto's expression became even uglier as he looked at the 2 people who were tied up after just one encounter. Just one incarnation easily dealt with 2 mid-level spies without even making any big moves, and even the original body didn't move. As a good spy, when you judge that you cannot defeat the enemy, you will evacuate immediately. A spy is a profession responsible for investigation and assassination, and there is no need to fight as hard as a berserker. After just a moment of thought, Roberto turned around and burst out with terrifying speed. He actually ran away. Looking at Roberto's escape, Lear found it a little funny. He narrowed his eyes, and the blood swirled in his hands, then wrapped the Night Rose. A terrifying and hideous blood-red rose appeared in his hand. He raised the bloody rose, and the bright red light turned the heavy sword into a spear, and then Lear threw it out with force. Roberto ran desperately. The intelligence was wrong. The heir of Stuart in front of him was not a mid-level wizard at all, he thought to himself, but the next moment, a buzzing sound came from behind, and Roberto's hair stood on end. He looked back and saw a bright red light rushing towards him like red lightning, carrying the breath of death. Roberto instinctively used his strongest means of saving his life and forced his way out. A high-level spy skill that removes the control effect on oneself, forcing oneself into an unselectable detached state. That lasts for 1 second, and moves 100 meters in the selected direction. The moment Roberto activated his skill, the blood spear pierced through his body. Feeling the violent force, Roberto was frightened. The next second, his body appeared 100 meters in front of the right. Roberto breathed a sigh of relief and prepared to speed up his escape, but before he could feel at ease for a moment, the bright red spear 100 meters away turned and stabbed at him again. Death Thorn Piercing has the attribute of a guaranteed hit, so escaping like this is completely meaningless. This time Roberto didn't have time to react. The spear pierced Roberto's shoulder straight through, carrying Roberto all the way, crashing into several large trees, and finally stuck in a tree trunk. Roberto's face turned pale, and the health bar above his head dropped significantly. Lear smiled at the scene, then instructed the blood incarnation beside him to bring Roberto back. The three spies were captured by Lear without any resistance. The incarnation of blood tied Roberto with life-binding shackles, and the bloody rose had returned to Lear's hands. The hideous hole on Roberto's shoulder showed how terrible the blow just now was. Blood continued to flow from Roberto's body. If he didn't have the physique of a high-level professional, he would have died long ago. What happened? Milia and her two daughters, who were resting in the tent, were also awakened by the sound of fighting. Nothing, just three assassins. Lear smiled. Assassin? Milia's eyes widened. Lear nodded without explaining, but looked at Roberto. Now can you tell me, who sent you here? Roberto was silent. Having been a spy for so many years, he knew better than anyone what would happen to people like them if they were caught. Even if they told Lear the truth, the other party would never let them go. Who would let go of an assassin who wants to kill them? You will never know. How can you, a person who has betrayed the laws of war, be qualified to return to Fort Pharaoh and inherit the glory of Stuart? Roberto said sarcastically with a miserable smile. As he spoke, he suddenly chewed something in his mouth. After about 3 seconds, his body began to tremble and dark blood flowed from the corners of his mouth. Without giving Lear a chance to interrogate him, his health bar began to drop madly and finally emptied completely. Roberto actually committed suicide. Lear frowned slightly. The other party committed suicide so decisively that he didn't even have time to stop him. He looked at the other two spies again. Their bodies began to tremble like Roberto's. In a very short time, the blood bars above their heads were emptied, and they turned into two dead bodies. These are a high-level spy and two mid-level spies, not just any random people. I and the whole Stuart. There is only Albert, an extraordinary level war knight. Apart from Albert, high-level professionals are the strongest, but now the other party committed suicide without hesitation. Who could make a high-level professional willing to commit suicide for him? Lear was silent. You have completed the mission assassination from the shadow, C rank. You gained 5 experience points and 10 gold coins. Milia and the other two girls also showed expressions of fear when they saw this scene. The way the 3 people committed suicide was still somewhat creepy. Lear. Milia grabbed Lear's sleeve. It's okay, they just committed suicide. Lear came back to his senses and smiled indifferently. You go and rest, it's okay now. As he said that, he pulled Milia and the other two girls back to the tent. After comforting the 3 women, Lear returned to their bodies and searched their belongings, but found nothing useful, only some coins. That he used the night rose to cut off the heads of the 3 people, took out a wooden box from the storage ring, froze the heads of the 3 people with frost spells, and put the heads into the wooden box. Since the 3 men came from Stuart, Lear planned to wait until he arrived at Fort Pharaoh to investigate the 3 men's background. High-level professionals must not be unknown people in the Pharaoh fortress. After settling everything, Lear returned to the carriage. Ophelia also woke up, looked at Lear and asked, "What happened?" "It's none of your business." Lear shook his head. Ofengina gritted her teeth, snorted coldly and turned her head away. There was no conversation that night, and the second half of the night was calm. As the sunlight shone through the outside of the carriage, Lear and his companions packed their luggage and set off again. What happened last night was just a small episode. Although Lear felt it was a little strange, he didn't care much about it. This was the confidence given to him by his own strength. In the following days, the group did not encounter any more danger. They walked and stopped, and finally arrived at the Pharaoh fortress a week later. Fortress of Pharaoh IT is located in the southwest of the Kingdom of Briefville, bordering the Kingdom of Nox in the south, and in the west is a series of continuous decisive mountain ranges with a large number of magical beasts and monsters. This is the largest city in the southwest of the kingdom. Its area and prosperity are comparable to that of the royal city of Brayfield. People here believe in the laws of war. The customs are simple, and the residents are very strong in combat, because they have to defend against the beast tide in the Decision Mountains every year. The War Church awakens the laws of war for the residents free of charge every year, which has led to a large number of professionals here. As the carriage gradually approached the Pharaoh fortress, the towering city walls were completely different from those of the royal city. They looked more majestic and more solid. Lear recalled his memories of his previous life. He had been here before, and he was shocked when he came here for the first time in his previous life. The atmosphere here is completely different from that of Brayfield. There is no such deeply rooted class distinction between nobles and commoners. There is only one noble family here, the Stuart family, although there are many knights under the family, but most of them were born as commoners and then received knighthood from the Stuarts. They manage public security in all parts of the fortress, and there are rarely cases of bullying, because the war church helps civilians awaken their affinity for the laws of war for free. People here will go to the fortress arena to settle their grievances when they have a fight, using duels to resolve conflicts, but this does not mean that there is no darkness here. It is just much better than other cities. Simply put, Pharaoh Fortress and Brayfield Royal City are two completely different places. In the previous life, some players joked that Stuart's territory is another kingdom with complete autonomy and self-control, and it is a country within a country. End of this chapter. Chapter 116 Arrival at Fort Pharaoh, 3K. The carriage arrived at the city gate. Before arriving at Fort Farlow, Lear erased the Stuart family lion emblem on the carriage to avoid attracting attention. The reason why I separated from Albert was to have time to settle Ophninia. Are we there yet? Milia looked out the window curiously through the curtains. It was also her first time to come to the Pharaoh Fortress, and she was a little shocked when she saw the scene before her. We're here, but we'll have to wait a while before we can take you to see Her Majesty the Queen. Lear nodded, then glanced at Ophelia. In case Ophninia made a scene, he handed Milia a handkerchief. This is the drug I prepared. Let's knock Ophelia unconscious temporarily. Lear said lightly. Ophelia, who was originally indifferent, sat up straight when she heard Lear's words. What are you going to do? Ophninia was very angry. Is there any human rights left? He knocked her out at any time. Milia was also a little hesitant. Let's do it. Ophninia's affair cannot be discovered. We must be cautious until we are completely settled in Fort Pharaoh. Lear's attitude was firm. Although the possibility of others recognizing Ophelia is not high, it is better to be prepared. At Lear's urging, Miriam finally took action and put her handkerchief over Ophninia's mouth and nose. Ophninia looked unwilling, but she had no choice but to fall asleep soon. Lear waved his hand and removed the life-binding shackles from Ophelia, then took out a woman's lace hat from his storage ring and said, Cover Ophelia. We will find a hotel to put her up there later. Milia did as she was told and placed the lace hat on Ophninia's head, making it look as if she was asleep. This time, the carriage also drove to the guards at the city gate. The guard walked forward and was slightly startled when he saw Lear's appearance, but he immediately returned to normal. He said, the fee to enter the city is 10 copper coins. Lear took out 10 copper coins from his pocket and handed them directly to the guard. The guard didn't say much and then waved and let him go. Passing through the deep city gate passage, bustling noises can be heard from all around. There is an endless stream of pedestrians and carriages coming and going, a dazzling array of strange stalls, and a little bookboy shouting and selling newspapers. Most of the pedestrians around were wearing armor and had weapons on their waists or backs. Most of these are adventurers from the Fortress Adventurers Association. As soon as Lear entered the fortress, he could feel the gazes cast at him from all directions. His appearance is so outstanding, and with his golden hair, he looks particularly noble and elegant. Lear sighed slightly. Even though he had erased the Stuart family crest on the carriage, that damn charm could not be erased. Look at that man, he looks even more handsome than Knight Yazan. Good Lord, who is that gentleman? He's really handsome. Does any of you know him? There was a burst of chattering all around, and Milia in the carriage couldn't help pouting when she saw these women staring at Lear. What a bunch of women who don't know how to be reserved. How can they stare at a man like this? It's so rude. Lear turned a blind eye to these discussions. He was looking for a more upscale hotel to accommodate Ophninia, but he could not remember the layout of the Pharaoh Fortress very clearly. Just when he was feeling distressed, a hot lady walked up to him. The woman was wearing armor, and although it was winter, large areas of her skin were still exposed. This is a professional of war law, and he seems to be quite strong. Handsome man, you seem to need help? The woman stared at Lear intently and licked her rosy lips, as if she was looking at some delicious food. My name is Hannah, I'm a gold-level mercenary, and I'm quite famous in the Pharaoh Fortress. You seem to be new here, do you need me as a guide? Lear smiled and looked at the beautiful woman in front of him. My name is Lear, beautiful lady. As you can see, we have indeed just arrived at Fort Pharaoh, and now we are planning to find a better hotel to stay in. Do you have any good recommendations? I can pay you if you can take me there. Listening to Lear's words, the eyes of the woman named Hannah lit up slightly. It turned out that a man who looked like a gentleman was also very pleasant to talk to. Although many people had flattered her and praised her beauty before, the feeling coming from Lear's mouth was completely different from that coming from other people's mouths. Hannah's eyes became a little hot, and she smiled like a flower. "Handsome Lear, I'm just looking for a hotel." "What kind of hotel do you want to find?" "I hope it can be a hotel with better security and more privacy." "Money is not a problem." Lear also smiled. "Is that so?" Hannah blinked. From Lear's words, she learned another piece of news. This guy was not short of money. He was handsome and rich. She hadn't tasted such a high-quality man for a long time. Just as she was thinking about how to trick Lear, Milia in the carriage couldn't help it. "We don't need your guide." The girl opened the curtain and looked at Hannah angrily. She really couldn't bear it anymore. The woman in front of her was openly seducing her man, although the other party hadn't expressed it too directly. But as a woman, how could Milia not understand that kind of burning look? The sudden appearance of the girl made Hannah stunned for a moment. She looked at Miria with a flash of surprise in her eyes. The smooth silver hair and blue pupils made her feel ashamed. For the first time, she felt a little insecure about her appearance. "Milia." Lear also turned his head and saw Milia's determined eyes. He shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, and then looked at Hannah beside him. "I'm sorry, ma'am, my fiancé is a little shy, so can you show me the way? We can just go there by ourselves." Fiancé, Hannah came to her senses and looked at Lear and Miria, a handsome man and a beautiful woman. She did seem a little redundant. She was a little disappointed. Since the other party was married, she didn't want to destroy the relationship between the couple. "Okay then, the hotel you're looking for is." Hannah gestured to Lear for a while, and the route was quite complicated. Lear listened carefully and finally nodded. "Did you really remember it? Do you need me to draw a map?" Hannah asked. "No, ma'am, I've already written it down, thank you for your help." Lear smiled. Hannah was a little surprised that she had memorized it in such a short time. The place was not far away. Lear gestured toward Hannah without explaining. "Then we'll meet again if we're lucky." Lear said goodbye, pulled the reins and drove away in the carriage. Hannah watched the carriage leave, feeling a little regretful as she stood there. She shook her head and left as well. After the two of them walked away, the guard in front of the city gate came out and looked at the direction where Lear left with some suspicion. Then he handed over the task of guarding the city gate to other guards and hurried away. In an ordinary room, a fairly handsome young man was pacing back and forth in the room, his expression somewhat worried. This time, there was a sound of footsteps outside the door. When the young man heard the sound, his expression changed and he became expectant. He opened the door and saw the person coming. He was a little disappointed that it wasn't the person he was waiting for, and then asked, "What's the matter that brought you here in such a hurry?" "Sir, I saw the person in the portrait you gave me at the city gate," the guard said quickly. "What did you say?" The young man was startled, his expression became gloomy, and then he seemed to have thought of something. "Then have you seen Mr. Roberto?" "Mr. Roberto? No, has Mr. Robert gone out?" The guard was a little confused. The young man's expression became even more gloomy. He was silent for a long time before asking, "Did you see where the person in the portrait went?" The guard was stunned for a moment, then remembered the conversation in front of the city gate just now. "I think he went to the Kent Hotel." "Kent Hotel?" The young man's originally gloomy expression eased slightly when he heard this. His eyes flickered, and he seemed to be thinking a lot at that moment, and finally his eyes became gloomy. "Okay, I get it. You can go down now. Don't let anyone know what I asked you to do." He waved his hand, signaling the guard to leave. The guard nodded, turned around and was about to leave, but just as he turned around, the young man behind him drew the sword from his waist and stabbed the guard in the chest. The guard's body froze for a moment, and he subconsciously touched the sword that pierced his chest. "You?" He turned his head with an incredible expression on his face. "Don't blame me for being cruel. You know things you shouldn't know. I will take good care of your wife," the young man said grimly. The guard's expression gradually became ferocious. He stretched out his hand to grab the young man in front of him, but the light in his eyes soon disappeared. The young man curled his lips in disdain, then drew out his sword and let the corpse fall to the ground. He took out a sack from the side, put the body on the ground into it, and then threw it aside skillfully. After doing all this, he looked at the wall beside him. On the wall hung a portrait of a man with blonde hair and handsome appearance. "Lear, you didn't go to Stuart's mansion. Are you giving me a chance?" he muttered to himself. As a wizard who has been away from Stuart for more than 10 years, What qualifications do you have to come back? And you shamelessly want to be Stuart's successor? I will let you know that only a true war knight is qualified to be the heir of Stuart. And you should stay in the royal city honestly. End of this chapter. Chapter 117, for K. Another assassination. The carriage moved slowly along the street, following the route Hannah had just indicated. Along the way, many girls and ladies showed interest when they saw Lear driving. Although he rejected Hannah's request to go with him, Lear's charm will not disappear. As he got closer to the bustling area, more and more people were looking at Lear. Milia pouted in the car. What's wrong with the women in this city? Why are they so unrestrained? She was a little annoyed, and at the same time she felt a sense of crisis. She knocked on the partition of the carriage. Lear turned his head when he heard the voice. What's wrong? Stop for a moment, Milia said softly with a blush on her cheeks. Lear was a little confused, but he still pulled the reins to stop the carriage. When the carriage stopped, Milia opened the door and got out. She closed the door, came to Lear, and sat in the front seat. Milia acted as if nothing had happened. She carefully held Lear's arm and whispered, "Let's go." Lear raised his eyebrows and thought Miria was kind of cute. "Hold on tight and don't fall down," he said with a smile and started the carriage moving again. There was Miria sitting next to Lear, as if asserting her sovereignty, but it did not reduce the attention, but instead attracted more people's attention. Lear didn't care, and soon the carriage arrived at the hotel Hannah mentioned, Kent Hotel. The style of the hotel is quite quaint. There is a garden at the entrance and a fountain sculpture. It looks more like a manor than a hotel. Lear drove the carriage to the door and stopped. Everyone got off the carriage. He glanced at the unconscious Ophelia in the carriage, thought for a moment, and then carried Ophelia on his back. Milia looked at this scene and pouted, but didn't say anything, and everyone entered the hotel. Welcome. The hotel maid looked at the man and 4 women who came in, nodded with a smile, and when she saw their faces clearly, she was a little surprised. The appearances of the 5 people are all outstanding. Although they are wearing ordinary clothes, their temperament cannot deceive people. Could it be that the offspring of a big family came out to gain experience? The maid thought, "Excuse me, are there any rooms here?" Lear asked as he walked forward with Ophelia on his back. "Yes, sir. How many rooms do you want?" "1 room." Lear said with a smile. One room?" The maid's expression became a little strange. She looked at Lear's handsome and burly figure, and then looked at the 4 beautiful girls behind Lear. "Yes, I hope it can be bigger so that we can live in it." Lear added, ignoring the maid's strange expression, "Yes, our luxurious suite is fully equipped with various facilities and has 2 large beds, which is enough for 5 people to rest." The maid smiled and said, "But the price is a bit, please book a room for me." Lear didn't care about the price at all. The 500,000 gold coins that Duke Norton paid as compensation were still with him, and Albert didn't want them at all. "Okay, sir, the deluxe suite is 10 silver coins a day. How many days do you plan to stay?" The maid said excitedly. The deluxe suite is the most luxurious room in their hotel. The cost of 1 day's rent is more than 1 month's income of an ordinary civilian. Usually only powerful professionals will live there. If Lear stayed, she could get a lot of reward commission. Lear glanced at Ophelia on his back, thought for a few seconds and said, "Then let's open it for a month." "A month?" The maid widened her eyes. "Yes, 1 month." Lear smiled and took out 3 gold coins from his pocket and handed them to the maid. 1 gold coin is equal to 100 silver coins, and 30 days is 300 silver coins, which is 3 gold coins. The maid still felt a little dreamy after receiving the gold coin from Lear. She immediately said with an excited smile, "Okay, sir. I will do it for you right away." The maid happily went to complete the check-in procedures. Soon, Lear received a bunch of keys. "Sir, this is the key to the luxurious suite on the 4th floor. Please follow me." The maid greeted warmly. Everyone followed behind, walked through the long corridor, came to a tall building at the back, and then went up the stairs to the 4th floor. After leading Lear and others to the door, the maid left tactfully. Before leaving, she said that if they needed anything, they could go to the front desk to find her. Everyone entered the room and Lear closed the door. There were 2 large beds in the room, and Lear placed Ophelia on one of them. But he used his mental power to sense the room, and after finding nothing unusual, he said to Adele, "Adele, you and Affanina should stay in the hotel for the time being. Once Milia and I settle down in the Pharaoh fortress, we will come to pick you and Affanina up." "What are you going to do next?" Milia asked, sitting on the bed. "Of course I'm going home to see my father." "Milia, you must miss Her Majesty the Queen a lot." Walking to Milia, Lear gently stroked the girl's long hair. No one here knows your identity. Once you get to Stewart Mansion, you can live like a normal person. But if you want to go out, you'd better tell me. After all, we just got here. Lear added that he remembered the assassin he encountered when he came to Fort Pharaoh. The current Stewart family is not as simple as he thought. Milia nodded. Soon it was evening, the maid brought the meal, and Ophinia woke up. She was angry at what Lear had done to her, but she could do nothing about it. After dinner, Lear bit Ophilia's neck in front of everyone. They were all in the secret room before, and although Ofinkina felt a little embarrassed, she was used to it. But now the three girls next to her were staring at her. Her shame reached its peak in an instant, and at the same time, an inexplicable excitement rose in her heart. The golden law source material carrier's shame, grief, and excitement emotional fluctuation values have reached 98%, and you have gained 3% of the golden law affinity. The long-lost reminder of improving the affinity of law appeared in front of Lear. He looked at Ophelia under him with a playful expression. What are you looking at? Ophinia asked in shame and anger. Nothing. Lear smiled. We have done this many times before. I thought you were used to it. And, you seemed very excited just now? Who's excited? Ophinia's cheeks were as red apples. She struggled to break free from Lear's hand, retreated to the bed, and wrapped herself in the quilt. Seeing Ophelia's embarrassed look, Lear stopped teasing her and said, I will come here to suck once a day, and I will leave the incarnation of blood here. If you want to escape, you can try, but if you are caught by me, you will be punished. He seemed to have found another characteristic of Ophelia. Emilia and the other two girls looked at the interaction between Lear and Ophinia with strange expressions. It was completely dark outside. Lear planned to take Milia and Iro home tomorrow, so everyone went to bed. Lear and Miriam shared a bed, and the other three shared a bed. Silent all night. The next morning, after breakfast, Lear took Milia and Eno away. He held in his hand the map that he had asked the hotel maid to prepare. The Pharaoh fortress was very large, and the Stewart family's mansion also covered a large area, located at the innermost part of the fortress. After looking at the route, Lear put the map away, and Milia still sat with him at the front of the carriage. Eno was alone in the carriage, which made Eno, as a maid, feel strange. The carriage started moving. There were still many pedestrians and carriages passing by on the road. After about 10 minutes, the carriage turned around an intersection. Hurry, stop. On the other side of the lane, another carriage came galloping, and the driver tried desperately to control the horses, but to no avail. The horses seemed to be frightened, their eyes were a little red, and they were running like crazy. They didn't show any intention of stopping when they saw Lear's carriage. The vendors on the roadside were also startled and retreated to both sides. The pedestrians around them also dispersed, leaving Lear alone in the middle of the road. Unable to hide, Emilia showed a panic expression and grabbed Lear's sleeve. Lear narrowed his eyes slightly, and when the carriage was about to reach him, a bone-chilling chill instantly swept over him. The ground was covered with cold frost, extending all the way to the oncoming carriage. The next second, the carriage that had originally collided was frozen into an ice sculpture, and under the action of inertia, it stopped just in front of Lear's carriage. The scene stunned the passers-by around. They looked at Lear, who was sitting motionless in the carriage. Mage, someone said in astonishment. In the Pharaoh fortress, almost all the people are professionals of the law of war, and professionals of other laws have not appeared for many years. A wizard. That's a bit strange. Just as everyone was looking at Lear curiously, the carriage frozen by the ice suddenly exploded with a deafening noise. Fragments of ice and carriage flew everywhere, hitting the onlookers who were nearby. Many people were injured as a result. Lear did not expect the carriage to explode. But he reacted quickly and a magic shield appeared in front of him, barely blocking the impact of the explosion. The flames burned on the broken carriage, the ice that frozen the carriage melted, and the coachman's already broken body fell out of it. Oh, by the laws of war, how could this happen? A vendor nearby said in disbelief. The other onlookers also reacted and looked at the bodies of Lear and the driver in the middle of the road, and there was a lot of discussion for a while. Lear also looked at the coachman's body, and he sensed a hint of conspiracy. The explosion just now was quite powerful. If he hadn't frozen the carriage in advance and set up a magic shield, he would have been in a mess. If it was an ordinary mid-level professional, he would be seriously injured if not killed after being hit by the carriage and then caught off guard by the explosion. He glanced at the flames burning on the carriage, which smelled of gunpowder. There was gunpowder on the carriage and the horses were out of control, so it is hard to believe that this was an accident. It seems that the person who sent Someone to kill him has done it again. Lear shook his head, somewhat disdainful of the person behind the scenes. This idiotic assassination method was too low level and could not pose any threat to him at all. Moreover, it was very bold to carry out such a blatant assassination after he had already arrived at the Pharaoh fortress. What happened? A stern voice suddenly came from not far away. A stern-looking young man in armor came over with a team of guards. Looking at the mess at the scene and the corpses on the ground, his expression became serious. It's Knight Finn. Someone called out the name of the leading knight. The knight named Finn walked to the wreckage of the carriage and checked the condition of the carriage. Then he raised his head and looked at Lear, who was not far away. Sir, could you please tell me what happened? This man's carriage lost control, I froze it, and then it exploded. Lear briefly described the situation. Knight Finn frowned. You said it exploded? Yes, if you don't believe it, you can ask the merchants next to you. They saw it too. Lear shrugged and Knight Finn pondered for a moment and walked over to a nearby vendor to find out what was going on. After about 5 or 6 minutes, he came back and said, Sir, I understand the situation. Can you please come with me now? What? Lear was stunned. According to the situation at the scene, the carriage was indeed out of control, but it suddenly exploded after being frozen by you, which is very suspicious. Do you suspect that I was the one who caused the carriage to explode? Lear narrowed his eyes and looked up and down at the knight in front of him. This needs to be confirmed, sir. Knight Finn replied in a deep voice. Looking at the attitude of the knight in front of him, Lear clearly felt that he was being targeted. He was silent for a few seconds and then laughed. I won't go with you. Do you want to violate the public security regulations of the Pharaoh fortress? Knight Finn's attitude turned cold. I don't know what law and order you're talking about, but a carriage filled with explosives was running rampant on the street, and the guards of your fortress were completely unaware of it. Lear chuckled and said, The carriage exploded. Instead of confirming the identity of the deceased, you want to arrest me? We will confirm the identity of the deceased, sir, but you are indeed suspected of murdering him. Knight Finn insisted. Lear laughed. He looked at the knight in front of him. He found the other party's unreasonable attitude a little ridiculous. You can try to catch me. He didn't want to waste time talking to the knight in front of him. After all, he was just sent by the people who wanted to kill him. Since you are stubborn, don't blame me for taking action. Knight Finn's eyes became sharp. He raised the sword in his hand and was about to take action. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly came from not far away. What are you doing? Not far away, 2 beautiful girls slowly walked over. Lear looked back and saw that they were Avian and Greta, who had arrived at the Pharaoh fortress in advance. Lear? Avian saw Lear in the carriage and made a surprised sound. End of this chapter. Chapter 118. For K, you should understand the difference between high and low sister. Lear was also very happy to see Avian coming over. Sister? Now it was Finn's turn to be confused. He looked at Avian, then at Lear, stunned for a few seconds, then his eyes widened. You are Master Lear! Finn exclaimed. Seeing Finn's attitude, Lear raised an eyebrow. The other party didn't know him, and it seemed that he was not pretending. Lear originally thought that the knight who was looking for trouble was being instructed to arrest him, but the other party did not know him. I guess it that the person behind the scenes did not tell Finn his identity, or is Finn just a fool? He thought for a few seconds, then smiled at Finn. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Lil Stewart. Do you still want to arrest me now? Arrest? What's going on? Avian frowned. It's okay, it's just a misunderstanding. Finn quickly shook his head, looking at Avian with a bad look, and his whole body trembled, but Avian didn't intend to let Finn go. She looked at the corpse on the ground and kept questioning him. After listening to Finn's whole story, Avian became angry. How could something like this happen when you patrol the fortress every day? What if the explosion hurts someone? She asked Finn. If Finn could only smile awkwardly, not daring to say anything back. Seeing Finn was so afraid of Avian, Lear showed a strange expression on his face. His sister seemed to be different in the Pharaoh fortress than in the royal city. Avian glared at Finn, then looked at Lear. This matter must have nothing to do with Lear. He just returned to the fortress. Anyway, you'd better find out what's going on as soon as possible. Lear, you too. Why didn't you tell the guards at the city gate when you arrived at the fortress? Now come home quickly with me. Your father and mother have been waiting for you for a long time. She complained again. Lear nodded. Let's go, sister. You and Greta come up. Avian didn't hesitate and pulled Greta into the carriage. Lear glanced at Finn and drove away in the carriage. Finn stood there, watching the carriage leave, and breathed a sigh of relief. He shook his head helplessly and could only call the guard beside him to take the body away and clean up the scene. The many vendors nearby looked at each other in bewilderment after hearing what Avian had just said. What did Miss Avian just say? That Mr. Lear is Miss Avian's brother? Why haven't I heard that Lord Albert has a son? You don't know this, I think. I still remember Master Lear, but that was more than 10 years ago. An elderly man stood up and said, Master Lear went to the royal city more than a decade ago and has not returned since then. It seems that he has been called back by Lord Albert now. What is Master Lear doing in the royal city? Someone asked. I heard that he was learning magic. The old man answered uncertainly. Magic? Everyone was stunned and had strange expressions on their faces. Lear was unaware of the gossip behind the scenes. He had already arrived at Steward House in his carriage. Compared to the Steward Mansion in the royal city, the mansion in the Pharaoh Fortress is obviously more magnificent and comparable to the royal palace in the royal city. Looking at the magnificent building in front of him, Lear couldn't help but sigh again. It was no wonder that the players in his previous life said that Stewart's territory was a country within a country. No matter how you look at it, this building is comparable to the royal palace. Lear shook his head and stopped the carriage at the door. The guards at the door were stunned when they saw the strange carriage, but they became respectful when they saw Avian getting off the carriage. Mississippi. Avian nodded, ignored the guards, and walked into the building with Lear. Lear, do you still remember our home? Avian asked. Of course, Lear replied cheekily. Oh, really? Then do you know where your previous room was? Avian continued to ask. Lear was silent, feeling somewhat embarrassed. He had no idea what was going on. Seeing that Lear didn't say anything, Avian smiled and stopped teasing Lear. Instead, she took Lear to the living room. Albert was leisurely drinking his morning tea, with a very beautiful woman sitting next to him. When Lear looked at it carefully, he felt an extremely intimate feeling. Father! Look who's here! Avian said loudly. Albert and the woman turned their heads and saw Lear, Mariette, and Eno approaching. Albert raised his eyebrows. You're back. I'm back, father. Lear nodded, then looked at the woman beside him. The woman stood up when she saw Lear and stopped only when she was in front of Lear. You little bastard, you finally decided to come back, the woman scolded with a smile, but her eyes gradually turned red. Lear took a deep breath. This feeling of blood being thicker than blood made him feel a little overwhelmed. After a while, he said, I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have come back sooner. Hearing Lear's address to her, the woman's body trembled slightly, and she finally couldn't help but shed tears. It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back, she said, reaching out and holding Lear in her arms. The hall fell silent, and no one disturbed the reunion between mother and son. But not long after, a voice came from behind. I heard that Brother Lear is back? A young man in knight's armor walked in. He was handsome and looked much older than Lear. Everyone was disturbed by the young man who suddenly broke in. When Avian heard what the young man said, her brows immediately raised. Yazan, what are you talking about? What's wrong? The young man named Arson shrugged innocently. I just want to see my brother Lear. Lear turned his head and felt a strange breath. He glanced at the young man behind him, and then looked at Albert beside him. I have never heard that I have a brother? Oh, you don't know yet. My father was Uncle Albert's comrade in arms. After my father died, Uncle Albert adopted me. I have always regarded Uncle Albert as my godfather, so I say you are. Yasin explained with a smile, but before he could finish, he was interrupted by Albert. That's enough. Albert said in a deep voice, Yazan, you are Kag's son. Kag died because of me, so I adopted you. But whether it's you or Kag, you are both Stuart's retainers. Lear is my son and will be the Duke of Stuart in the future, and you will be Lear's knight squire. Arson, I allow you to call me uncle when no one is around, but you should also understand the difference between the superior and the inferior. Albert said a lot in a row, and his tone was very stern. It was obvious that Yasin's rude words made him angry. The atmosphere in the hall became a little heavy. Lear looked at his brother with a changeable expression and found it a little ridiculous. Was it that the person who sent people to assassinate me twice before was this kind of person? At first he thought it was some powerful elder knight in the family, but just such an ignorant knight. An adopted child was thinking of killing him, the legitimate steward heir, and then becoming the new steward heir. If this is true, Lear has to admire the thinking of this brother. The world of law is similar to the Middle Ages in the West. The nobles attach great importance to blood inheritance, and an outsider can never inherit the title. Even if they rebelled and occupied the Pharaoh fortress, they would never be recognized by the kingdom. They would only become bandits who occupied the mountains and were attacked by all the nobles. Okay, Arson, you should be more careful next time. You should leave first and don't come in and out of Steward House casually. Albert ordered them to leave. I understand, Uncle Albert. Yasin smiled absent-mindedly, then turned and left. While waiting for Yasin to leave, Avian pouted and said, "What an arrogant guy." Albert also sat down, thinking it was just a minor incident. Lear's mother Sophia looked at the two people behind Lear. When she saw Milia's iconic silver hair, her eyes lit up and asked, "Are you Philia's daughter?" "Yes, ah. Auntie, I'm Milia." Milia nodded a little stiffly. I knew that Albert had made an engagement with Lear. Come and let me see. Sophia walked to Milia. Lear looked at this scene, smiled, and came to Albert. Do you want to ask about arson? Albert seemed to know what Lear was thinking and said in a deep voice. Yes. Lear nodded. Come out with me. Albert sighed, then stood up and walked outside. Lear followed, and the two of them left the hall together. Sophia looked at the backs of the two people leaving without saying anything. She turned her head and said to Milia, "Milia, you must miss Philia too. I will take you to meet your mother." As she said that, she pulled Milia and walked in another direction. Only Eno and Avian were left in the hall. Looking at Eno, who seemed a little left out, Avian smiled and said, "Eno, let me take you around." With that, she took Eno's hand and left the hall. Outside the hall, Albert took Lear to the study and they sat down. Albert was silent for a while, as if recalling the past. Yasin is Kag's son, I have said it before. Kage was my former bodyguard. He died during a beast tide because he defended me from the attacks of the monsters. His last wish was for me to raise his child. I agreed. At that time, Yasin was already more than 10 years old. You also left the Pharaoh fortress and went to the royal city, so you didn't know. I began educating Yasin, hoping to train him to be as good a knight as his father. Yasin lived up to expectations and performed well in the Knights Templar. He is now close to a high rank. But I don't know since when, Yasin has been claiming to be my adopted son. I know all this, but I don't care. After all, his father died because of me. Arson seems unwilling to be just an adopted son. Lear smiled and said pointedly. Albert was silent. Of course he knew about Arson's little thoughts, but he just regarded them as the ignorant delusion of a junior. Father, did you know that I was assassinated on the way to Fort Pharaoh? Lear said suddenly. What? Albert was stunned for a moment, then his expression became a little serious. What happened? Lear took out the frozen heads of the 3 people who assassinated him from the storage space. These are the 3 men. Do you know them, Father? Albert looked at the face in the ice and suddenly his eyes widened. Roberto. Father, do you know him? Of course I know him. He is Kag's brother, and he died several years ago. Albert looked incredulous. Is he Kage's brother and Arson's uncle? Lear raised his eyebrows, finding it a little interesting, and Albert said that this person had died a few years ago, but why is he alive and well now, and why did he assassinate him? Do you think it was Arson who arranged Roberto to assassinate you? After a brief shock, Albert suddenly understood what Lear meant. Obviously. Lear nodded. Albert's eyes became sharp. He could tolerate Arson's little thoughts and actions, but assassinating his son, this is intolerable in any way. Just like an emperor, I can tolerate your corruption and bribery, and tolerate your forming cliques, but if you dare to attack the prince, you will only die. I'll ask Yasin about it. Albert said in a deep voice. What Yasin did had touched his bottom line. No need, Father. Lier shook his head. Let me investigate this little thing myself. Do you do it yourself? Yes. Lier smiled nonchalantly when he came into contact with Yazan just now. He felt a strange breath that did not belong to the laws of war, nor to gold and arcane. That's heresy. As an apostle of the law of blood, he easily smelled the scent of heresy on Yazan, and knew that heresy was involved. As the public beta of the game draws closer, various heretical laws have begun to surface. I wonder what heretical laws Arsene has come into contact with. Lier became interested and shook his head. No matter what it was, he would fight back. Since Arsene wanted to do something to him, he would be exposed one day. Instead, he was more interested in the mission given to him by the Lord of Blood. After completing the 4th Ring of Blood revival, he obtained the 5th Ring mission: follow the guidance of the Blood to find the Blood dynasty in the old dream. The guidance was still there when he was in the royal city. The vague direction it pointed to was the direction of the Pharaoh fortress. But when Lier came to the Pharaoh fortress yesterday, the guidance of the Blood suddenly disappeared. Could it be related to the heretical law in Yazan? Lier fell into deep thought. End of this chapter. Chapter 119, 3K. I can let you replace the Ershiching district Thump Square. This place is located on the edge of the Pharaoh fortress, close to the Decision Mountains. Every time 2 Beast Tide comes, the soldiers and adventurers of the Pharaoh fortress will gather here and wet for mobilization. The square is connected to a huge arch known as the Arc de Triomphe. It's rumored that the FRST Duke of Stuart walked through THS Gate and bowled the Pharaoh fortress here, thus taking in the important task of resisting the Beast Tide in the Decision Mountains. The Arc de Triomphe was originally 2 natural stone arch, and was later built into TS current appearance by craftsmen. In the center of Triumphal Square stands a statue of the FRST Duke of Stuart, with 2 gloomy face. Yazan walked to the Trumpnal Square and came to War Tiger Knights, which he led. Many members of the Knights showed respect when they saw Yazan. This adopted son of the Duke was quite prestigious in TE Knights Templar, both in terms of strength and character. There were even rumors that Arsene would become the next Duke of Stuart, a thought they didn't know where the rumor came from. 'Twas enough for them to take it seriously. Yazan calmed down, smiled, nodded as a gesture, and then walked into a room outside. Entering the lounge nearby, he closed the door and his expression became ferocious. He regarded Albert too as dull since he was a Cid, and even though his father died because of Albert, he see not have any resentment. After learning that he would be adopted by Albert, he became even more excited. After being adopted, he served diligently in the Knights of the Pharaoh Fortress for more than 10 years, and finally came the leader of one of the 3 Mahor knightly orders. He renamed the Original Knightly Order the Knights of the Fighting Tiger, corresponding to the Order of the Wild Lion, directly led by the Stuart family. Albert had always admired him, and even did not deny it when he heard that he was the other party's adopted son. He once thought that Albert also treated him as his son. Under this special care, Arsene had the unprecedented idea that the other party wanted him to be the Heha, was ecstatic and spread rumors that he would become the next Duke of Stuart. Aftoff, he knew that Albert had 2 Zon in the royalty, that Zon had a bank in war and chosen Arcana. How could such a parson be qualified to inherit Stuart Oni? Until recently, Albert went to the royal city to meet his real son. Albert then returned Akaniae that the Zon would return to Fart Farah. What does this mean? Are you planning to abandon him? He remembered WHST. Albert Thackle sighed. The reason why he said that to Lear was to test Albert's thoughts, but the result made him fell desperate. As Albert SSID, both he and his father were just Stuart's retainers, and his previous fantasies were as ridiculous as a clown. It seems that you have understood what rely is. Just when Arsene was feeling resentful, 2 female voice was heard from the side. His 2 tall woman, wearing tight feminine clothes and holding 2 pipe in her mouth. She looks tobe around 30 years old, but still as charm and as beautiful. Listening to the woman's words, Yazan turned his head and said angrily, I don't understand, just because there is no blood relationship? How can 2 useless wizard like LR be qualified doinher? He tlee of Stuart's Hannah, LR is not the waste you said. The woman suddenly laughed and took out a document and put it in the table. This is some information found about Lear. The woman knocked on the table. You said that Lear was a waste in the past. Then, might agree with you, but it's Elferent now what? Yazan said irritably. You'll know once you take it. Look, the woman pushed the document towards Yazan. After taking the document, Yazan began to browse through FT. Looking at contents on the document, his expression gradually became shocked. A dual law professional, he sighed in disbelief. That's right, the woman Amilad. Laris regained the favor of the law of war and has become Dussel law professional. That's why Albert called Lear back Toth Pharaoh Fortress liar, i.e. no longer a loser. Have never heard of 3 Cuzzle law professional. How could this happen? Yazan's eyes became dull and he looked a little lost seeing Yazan's dejected look, The woman's eyes flashed with contempt. You don't have to be so depressed. It doesn't matter whether Lyre's a dual law professional or not. Nave already said it. No noble would choose an outsider as their hate. The nobles place more emphasis on blokeline than you think. Albert is too professional of extraordinary level and still in high prima. Yenith absentance his previous gone, he can still have dot another 1 inch from the beginning. Your fantasies were UST fantasies. Day creams enough? Shay. Yaron Rory angrily. WS no use for you Tobe angry. Must telling the truth. The woman named Sheila exhaled 2 pu of smoke and continued to speak nonchalantly. Yazan clenched his STSI. When he really faced the reality, the feeling of loss made his heart swallowed by anger. The room fell into a brief silence. Looking at silent Yazan, Sheila said in a tempting tone, how about it? Do you want to consider my previous suggestion? Kill Lear and bring back the body. You are not Albert's son, but can make you replace Lear and become Albert's son. Anyway, you have already assassinated Lear twice, so you don't mind assassinating him 2 few more times. But this time, I need Lear's body to be well preserved. Yazan lowered his head, listening to Sheila's words, and did not speak for a long time. In the evening, Lear took Mila for a walk in the mansion. Although he wanted to move out as soon as possible, idea a place with a private yard to VE, and imprison off Anina again, he had to stay for it while after returning to his hometown Tomast his mother. How you feel? Lear asks Mila beside him. Fee. Very happy. Mila jumped up and down like an elf in the night. Used to have to hide in my bedroom, but now I am free. Master, dinner is ready not far away. Eno trotted over, and the lit maid had changed into her old maid out. I understand. Lier nodded and pulled Maya towards the restaurant. There were already quite a few people there when they arrived at the restaurant. Maya trotted over to Philia and hugged her mother's arm. Everyone please take a seat, Albert said casually. Everyone is sat down, waiting for the chef to serve the food. Albert looked at Lear. Lear, now that you are back, you should be ready to participate in the governance of the Stewart territory, of course. Father Lear nodded. With such a large territory to a backing, he would rather take it. Hearing Lesser nod, Albert breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Lear, the reincarnated person, would not be interested in the territory. After all, some strong people care more about their own strength. Lear was such a person before his reincarnation. He would be a little distressed. It would be such 3 waste if such too large territory had no one to inherit it. Okay, during this time we'll help you get familiar with the affairs in the fortress. Albert smile. Albert. What are you taking about? You let Lear work A equals Enon Ash comes BSCK? Haven't even hack a good look at him. Sophia on the SC stared in SSI Sayatidi. Albert way itis embarrassed because he had not considered his wife's thoughts. It's okay, mother, we'll come to 288. You often. Lear quickly tried to emote tinge over. Sophia smiled only after hearing what Liar said. The chef began to serve the dishes. Delicious dishes were brought cut one after another, and everyone was enjoying the meal. Putting a piece of chicken into her mouth, Greta looked at Lear and asked, Lear, when will you come back to Knox with me? Degreef Les raised his head and way stunned for a moment. Go back to Knox, yes. Don't you want to become my Lionheart Knight? The contract ceremony of the Lionheart Knight can only be performed at in Knox. Greta way little depressed. She could yes that list CN take this mstrudito ERTSTA. Greta, you want Lear to be your Lionheart Knight? Sophia was surprised. She knew what the Lionheart Knight represented. She glanced to Semilla beside her, and her expression became 3iti strange. Yes, Aunt Sophia thin Lear iita. But Greta knocked immediately. After hearing this, Lear was silent. Originally, he was very interested in the Lionheart Knight, but after experiencing the power of that extraordinary blood apostle, he was not so interested in the Lionheart Knight anymore. To IGN contract to become Lionheart Knight, you have to go to the Kingdom of Nox and bind yourself with Greta Inktace of spending that IME on completing the mission of the Lord of Blood. You might as well follow the gods. That way you have a better future than Greta. Okay, Greta, let's talk about the Lionheart Knight later. You have to get your father's approval. Albert spoke up. Besides, Lear has just returned to Fort Pharaoh. He needs to inherit the affairs of the fortress and will not leave in the short term. Greta felt unwilling to hear what Albert said, but she had nothing to say. The dinner ended peacefully. Leo walks up to Avian and asked, careful, what Lionheart Knight? Avian smiled and explained, and after about 5 minutes, Maya understood. Avian looked at me as frown, rolled her eyes, and sighed. I heard from my father that Lionheart Knights of the opposite sex usually become close partners with the contractor. Mealy's way stunned for a moment. When she hear? Trace of panic latched across her eyes. She sold Gusoy to Ivan and hurriedly ran in the direction of Lear, looking to me as leading back. Avian smiled playfully. End of this chapter. Chapter 120, 3K, Establishment of the Knights. The next day, Lear woke up from his sleep and found Milia, who was in dishevel, beside him. For some reason last night, Milia took the initiative to make him feel good. Although she only used her mouth and other parts of her body, it made Lear feel very comfortable. His slowly growing affinity with the law of the Morning Star also reached 20%, gaining +3 intelligence and +7 mysticism. After getting dressed, Lear looked at Milia, who was obviously awake but still pretending to be asleep. He smiled and walked out the door without exposing the little princess. Eno had prepared breakfast, and after breakfast, Lear went to see Albert. When he arrived at Albert's study, Albert was standing in front of the window, looking at the soldiers doing morning exercises outside. The day's plan begins in the morning. Now that you are back and ready to inherit Stuart's territory, I hope you won't be too lazy. Albert glanced at Lear, who pushed the door open. I won't fall behind in my training. Lear nodded. It's good that you know. Albert nodded, and then he continued, from now on, I plan to officially integrate you into the Pharaoh fortress. I have already notified the lords and knights from other territories. They will all gather at the Pharaoh fortress in a few days. I will arrange for you to meet them then. They will all be your knight squires in the future. You need to establish your authority and manage them well. At the same time, I hope you can establish a new knight order in the Pharaoh fortress. The knights? Lear asked in surprise. Yes. Albert nodded. There are currently 5 major professional knight orders in the Pharaoh fortress. In addition to the Mad Lion Knight Order directly under Stuart, there are 4 smaller knight orders. Their leaders are all outstanding young people. The Yazin you met before is the leader of the War Tiger Knights. They are responsible for the daily security of the Pharaoh fortress. You are my son and the future Lord Stuart. I hope you can form a new order of knights and become the leader of the younger generation. At this point, Albert paused, and then said helplessly, you know, when you were young, you abandoned the law of war and chose the law of arcane. Many people know this. Although you have regained your memory and the power of the law of war, they will still be prejudiced against you. If you can build a strong knight order, you can regain your prestige. Listening to Albert's words, Lear raised his eyebrows. He understood what Albert meant. Although he was the legitimate heir of Stuart, being an heir did not mean that he would be recognized. It would be meaningless for a lord to inherit a territory but not be recognized by his subjects. I understand, father. Lear nodded. It's good that you understand. I will take you to the place where the knights train today. There are many reserve knights there. You can recruit them there or in the fortress on your own. Albert smiled and believed that Lear could do it well. The two of them didn't waste any more time talking and, led by Albert, headed towards the place where the knights were training. About half an hour later, the carriage arrived at the Triumphal Square. Lear glanced at the tall statue standing in the Triumphal Square. That's a statue of our ancestor, the first Duke of Stuart. Albert's eyes were filled with reverence. The carriage stopped steadily. At this moment, there was already a group of knights training in the square. All of them were women. They were wearing black armor with red patterns on it. It forms a beautiful landscape. Leading the group was a red-haired female knight, holding a long sword and looking very heroic. That's the Red Eagle Knights, one of the 4 great knight orders I told you about. It's made up entirely of women, and the leader is Letitia Harvey, a mid-level war knight. Albert explained, don't underestimate these girls. Apart from Yasin's War Tiger Knights, the Red Eagle Knights are ranked second among the 4 major knight orders. Everyone, be serious. We must defeat Yasin in the next knight's confrontation. The red-haired female knight not far away shouted. She was watching the female knights in training with a serious expression, when suddenly she heard the sound of a carriage moving. She turned her head and saw a carriage with the Stuart Lion family emblem slowly approaching. She was startled and immediately asked her knights to stop their actions. Everyone is standing still. Albert and Lear had already gotten off the carriage and walked towards the female knight. Letitia, you and your knights are always so diligent, Albert praised. Thank you for the compliment, Lord Albert. Letitia blushed and looked at Albert with admiration, just like a little girl looking at her idol. She suddenly noticed the young man standing next to Albert. Seeing how handsome he was, Letitia was stunned for a moment. The young man in front of him was even more handsome than Arsene, and had a natural noble temperament. Let me introduce him to you. He is Lear, my son. Albert smiled. Son? Letitia was completely stunned. When did Lord Albert have a son? As she thought about it, she suddenly remembered what her father had once told her. More than 10 years ago, Lord Albert's son left the Pharaoh fortress and went to the royal city to become a wizard. Could it be that the young man in front of him was the son who left the Pharaoh fortress more than 10 years ago? Letitia guessed. Lear stepped forward and held out his hand. I'm Lear, nice to meet you. Letitia. Letitia looked at the handsome Lear in front of her, her cheeks slightly reddened, and she also stretched out her hand. At this time, people came one after another outside Can Square. When they saw Albert, they all became respectful. Lear turned around and saw knights wearing 3 other types of armor. It should be the other 3 knight orders that Albert mentioned. Lear also saw 2 familiar faces in the crowd, Arsène and Finn, who had blocked his way and tried to arrest him. The numerous members of the Knights Templar lined up one by one and were divided into 4 groups. Yazan glanced at Lear with a calm expression, and without saying anything, he stood in front of his war Tiger Knights. Hundreds of knights stood in the triumphal square. These were not ordinary knights, each of them was a professional in the law of war. The sunlight shines on the armor of these knights, reflecting a dazzling light. Lear looked at the people in front of him. The Red Eagle Knights, which were composed of women, had the smallest number of people, less than 100. Yazan's War Tiger Knights have the largest number of people, about 150. These knights looked at Lear beside Albert with curiosity or doubt. Who was qualified to stand beside the Steward Lord? Among the crowd, only Arsène and Finn knew Lear's identity. The former had a blank expression, while the latter looked a little embarrassed. Albert stood in front of everyone, his eyes swept across the neatly arranged knights, and his voice was loud and majestic. My brave knights, I haven't come here to review you for a long time, but now I see that you are in such an orderly manner. I am very satisfied. You are the knights of the Pharaoh fortress, in charge of the order of the fortress, and this is what should be done, the knights shouted, with a hint of heat in their eyes. Albert nodded with satisfaction, then looked at Lear beside him. I have brought a special guest today. Lear. Let me introduce him to them. Lear stepped forward and smiled at everyone. I am Lear, Lear Stewart. As soon as the word Stewart came out, all the knights showed astonishment, especially the members of the Fighting Tiger Knights. They looked at Lear, then at their captain, feeling a little weird. Yes, he is Lear Stewart, my son. Albert openly stated Lear's identity. He is my future successor, and he will fight with you to protect our homeland. I brought Lear here today to announce that Lear will establish a new knight order, join your 4 major knight orders, and will also participate in the subsequent knight order confrontation. Albert spoke slowly, and the 4 major knights looked at each other. Lear was also a little stunned. It was fine to establish a knight order, but what was this knight order fighting against? Lord Albert, Master Lear, is Master Lear going to establish the Knights Templar by drawing personnel from among us? Letitia stepped forward and asked. Of course not. Lear selects people from the reserve knights and also recruits people from the adventurers in the fortress. Albert explained. The captains of the 4 major knightly orders breathed a sigh of relief. As long as they didn't take people from their own orders, it would be fine. The members of these orders were all trained by them with great effort. Lord Albert, I have heard of Master Lear. I remember that Master Lear went to the royal city more than 10 years ago and changed his job to a mage? A leader of the Knights Templar stepped out from the crowd and looked at Lear with some doubt. He is the leader of the Ice Crusher Knights, Carlton Genas. Lear did go to the royal city more than 10 years ago, and he is indeed a wizard. Albert nodded. Lord Albert, please forgive my disrespect. Master Lear is a wizard. Can he lead a group of knights? Carlton said uncertainly. Following Carlton's words, everyone began to show doubts. They didn't know about Lear's situation before, but now they know. A wizard wants to form an order of knights. Listening to Carlton's words, Albert was not angry, but looked at Lear. Some people think you can't lead a knight group well. What do you think? Lear smiled. He understood what Albert meant. Now was the time to establish his authority. He walked forward and glanced at everyone present. Whether you can lead a knight group well is not something you can say. Since you don't believe it, any one of you can come up and challenge me. I don't use magic, I only compete with swordsmanship. End of this chapter. Chapter 121, 3K, Blasphemy of the Law. Essence. He once said this to another person. A wizard asking for a duel without using spells sounds like a humiliation or self-humiliation. The knights present looked at each other in bewilderment. None of them knew what this young master wanted to do. The 4 captains of the knights standing in the front also looked at each other. Arsene looked at Lear with a hint of resentment in his eyes. Albert personally acknowledged that Lear was the heir, which dispelled the rumors he had spread before. Feeling some strange looks from the knights, Arsene clenched his fists. Suddenly, when everyone was hesitant, he stood up and looked at Lier. Since Master Lier is so confident, let me give it a try. Yazan took out a huge sword out of thin air. It was more than one person tall. The sword was black and felt heavy and powerful. Since being adopted by Albert, he has been learning Albert's style, and his weapon is also a giant sword that advocates strength. This is a high-level giant sword. Being able to pick up a high-level weapon as a mid-level war knight shows that Arsene's talent in the laws of war is indeed not weak. The other three knightly teams on the side looked at Arsene in some astonishment. Although Lear said that he could accept the challenge, they were Stuart's retainers after all, and it would be an act of insubordination to rebel against their superiors, and Yazan actually took out his high-level weapon. Is it necessary to be so serious? Yazan didn't care about other people's thoughts at all. He just wanted to see how strong the heir who could be recalled by Albert was. How was he stronger than him? Lear and Albert also looked at Arsene who had come out. The former's expression did not change, while the latter sighed. If Arsene didn't have such unrealistic ideas, Albert could ensure that he would live a wealthy life, which would also be an explanation to his father. But Lear naturally would not refuse Yazan's challenge. He just smiled and the two walked to the center of the square. The knights made way for them, leaving only Lear and Yazan standing in the center. Lier took out the knight rose from the storage ring. The dark rapier was exposed in the sunlight, full of mystery and luxury, yet also carrying a deadly edge. As soon as this weapon appeared, it attracted the attention of the knights around. Judging from the aura emitted by the knight rose, it is far superior to the giant sword in Yazan's hand. It is an extraordinary weapon. Extraordinary weapons are so rare, but I didn't expect that Lear would have one in his hand. Albert also looked at the rapier in Lear's hand. He had seen it many times, but he didn't know where Lear got this weapon from. There was a hint of jealousy in Arsene's eyes, and he naturally regarded the rapier in Lear's hand as a subsidy from Albert. To be fair, I will not use Knight Rose's special skills. Lear held the rapier upright in front of his chest. Yazan snorted coldly. Without saying anything, he rushed directly towards Lear, and at the same time, the white light of the law of war emanated from his body. Of the War Knight's charge, a simple displacement skill, and the apprentice-level status skill Knight's Oath, slightly increase his own damage and defense. Facing Arsene's sudden attack, Lear remained calm. When Arsene rushed in front of him, Knight Rose passed along the sword of the giant sword, and the blade drew sparks on the giant sword. Lear just slightly turned his body to avoid Arsene's powerful attack. The giant sword hit the ground, leaving a slight dent, but it quickly recovered. The ground of Triumph Square is blessed by a special magic circle and can repair itself through magic. After dodging Arsene's attack, Lear moved to the other side, looking calm and composed from beginning to end. Angered by Lear's calm appearance, Arsene roared and rushed towards Lear again, with bursts of violent buzzing around his body. War Knight skill, Storm Assault. Carrying the heavy sword, Arsene's speed increased to an extremely high level, like a rushing locomotive, but Lear just shook his head. The speed was very fast, but there were too many flaws. He didn't even need to activate Aslan's royal swordsmanship. Lear chose another extraordinary sword technique, the Nightingale sword technique. This was also a very famous sword technique in the previous life, and it was almost a must-learn sword technique for professionals who prefer to use swords skillfully. The effect of swordsmanship is very simple, which is to increase movement speed and attack speed. There is no bonus to attack strength, only extreme speed. Lear's figure became slightly darker, and the knight rose in his hand became darker, like a nightingale at night, drawing a graceful arc and avoiding Arsene's attack again. Then he touched the armor on Arsene's back with the knight rose in his hand. The corrosive properties of the knight rose directly penetrated the armor, leaving a blood mark. Yazan was knocked off balance by the impact from behind, and he had to force the giant sword in his hand into the ground to avoid falling. The knights watching the scene widened their eyes. Fast, too fast. They only saw that Lear dodged Yazan's storm attack in the blink of an eye like a nightingale, and then pierced Yazan's armor with a sword. Albert also narrowed his eyes slightly. With his vision, he naturally saw that Lear used a powerful swordsmanship, which might be high level or even extraordinary. Is this the power that the reincarnated once had? He was a little jealous, but this kind of swordsmanship was obviously prepared for those agile law professionals, and it was completely incompatible with a power-oriented professional like him. The square fell into a brief silence. Lear did not take advantage of Arsene's disadvantage to pursue him. He shook his head. Before he obtained Aslan's royal swordsmanship, the Nightingale swordsmanship was the swordsmanship he used most often. It's a pity that in the setting of law, different sword techniques cannot be performed at the same time, otherwise his various sword techniques can enhance his strength to an incredible level. After stabilizing himself, Yazan turned around suddenly. The pain in his back did not panic him, but made him even more angry to eye in the fighting tiger knights. Sheila, who was dressed in tight clothes, narrowed her eyes at Lear. The man in front of her exuded an extremely strong aura of the law of war. She could even feel that it was stronger than that of Duke Stuart and Albert, but how is this possible? Even if he was favored by the war, it was too much favoritism. I don't think we should need a competition. After all, swords have no eyes. I just want to prove that although I am a wizard, I am capable of leading a group of knights, that's all. Lear raised his eyebrows. As he spoke, he suddenly felt a strange gaze. Turning his head, he saw a woman among the fighting tiger knights. This is the only woman among the knights except the Red Eagle knights. Compared to the other knights, the woman in front of him was obviously much older. Noticing Lear's gaze, the woman in the knight group smiled beautifully and winked at Lear. Discover the source of blasphemous law, causes a certain degree of negative emotional fluctuations in the carrier of the law source, and can gain corresponding law affinity. A system prompt suddenly popped up in front of him, and Lear was stunned. Blasphemy against the law? Roar! Before Lear could think about it, a roar resounded through the sky. You are affected by the War Knight's skill War Roar. Your movement speed decreases by 20% and your attack speed decreases by 20%. Lear felt his body grow heavy in an instant. Arson was staring at him intently, and a storm was brewing around him. War Knight's intermediate skill. Summon the Storm. As the strongest attack skill before the intermediate level of War Knight, Calling Storm not only has a large attack range, but also has a certain control effect. The knights around looked at Arson in disbelief. It was clearly just an ordinary sparring match, but he actually used such powerful skills. Albert's eyes were also a little deep, but he did not stop. The wind was howling so violently that even the knights watching the battle were affected and had to use all their strength to keep themselves steady. The longer you charge the storm, the more powerful it will be. And since the storm will gather around you, you don't have to worry about being attacked by surprise. If someone wants to launch a surprise attack, they have to break through the storm vortex around the user, which is equivalent to automatically colliding with the storm head. On. Lear came back to his senses. His expression didn't change. In his previous life, he was a war knight and understood the power of this skill, but no matter how powerful it was only a mid-level skill. The storm vortex is not truly airtight. The long sword in his hand emitted a roar of war, and a barely visible light golden light lit up. The next moment, Lear's figure turned into barely visible light and shadow and instantly disappeared from the spot. When the speed reached its maximum, Lear easily passed through the gap in the storm vortex and came in front of Yazan. The knight rose in his hand emitted a light golden light, and his agility was instantly transformed into power, hitting the blade of Yazan's giant sword. Boom! A loud noise was heard, and Arson looked at Lear, who appeared in front of him in astonishment. The next second, he felt an incomparable force coming from the giant sword in his hand. His wrist was shaken so hard that it hurt and the huge sword slipped out of his hand. Under the powerful impact, Yazan flew backwards and hit the storm vortex. He was baptized by the storm vortex he had created. The armor on his body fell apart in the storm, revealing his naked body. Outside the storm, before everyone could react, they heard a loud bang, and then a figure was blasted out from the storm, hit the ground, and rolled several times before stopping. Everyone looked at him in disbelief. Arson had fainted at this time. His armor was completely shattered, and he was only wearing an inner lining that had turned into strips of cloth. Large areas of his body were exposed, including the small male symbol. Many female knights of the Red Eagle Knights blushed and turned away when they saw this scene. They didn't expect that the usually handsome and majestic Yazan would have such a small thing. End of this chapter.